If you haven't been with us, TLTS represents Translanguaging and Transsemiotizing Research Group. And please give us a like and subscribe to us and press the bell button, and you will be notified of future events and seminars. Now, today we are very happy to have Dr. Zhang Yue. Dr. Zhang Yue is our young up-and-coming scholar at the Department of English Language Education in the Education University of Hong Kong. So she graduated from the Chinese University of Hong Kong with a PhD. She studied with the most famous scholar, Professor Ron Darwin, who is now teaching in UBC. And Dr. Zhang, her research interests encompass identity investment in language learning teaching, critical inquiries and pedagogy, and core. And the bulk of her publications concern the impact and imprint of ideologies in language learning and teaching, which is a topic which is still under research. So today, without further delay, let's have Dr. Zhang here. Dr. Zhang, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So good morning, afternoon, evening to everyone from different regions. Before I start, I want to thank Professor Angeline for this great opportunity to communicate with all of you. I also appreciate Dr. Phoebe Su, Dr. Qinghua Chen, and all the other TLTS research group members for your support. Thank you so much. So I'm Ellen. Currently, I'm working at the Department of English Language Education at EduHK, and I'm glad to share on the topic of gender ideologies in TESOL education today. So my talk consists of 4 parts. Firstly, I will introduce the background of this study. Patriarchy, meaning rule of the father, can date back to the Zhou dynasty from 1046 BC. In the Chinese culture, patriarchy was reinforced by Confucian ideals, shaping male dominance, gendered roles, and routines of toxic masculinity. So despite progress in women's rights, patriarchal values persist in the current society, especially in regions like Teochew areas and Hakka communities. In these communities, traditional naming practices, for example, reflect gender expectations. Like girls are sometimes given names alluding to welcoming a younger brother, symbolizing ongoing gender biases. A recent meme humorously illustrates these norms. If we look at this meme, it shows 5 female singers from different regional backgrounds, ethnical background, racial backgrounds. They are named using the same Chinese character Di, meaning a younger brother. As you can see, the same Chinese character here, right? It literally means female plus brother. So they are named like this, actual girls in China. Well, this male singer was named Yao Zu, meaning upholding the family honor. Dominates this popular, most popular actually, Chinese singing show this year and won the competition. So this meme criticizes how talented women in the family can be overshadowed by the youngest brother, revealing a persistent gender stereotypes. On the other hand, language learning is often viewed as a feminine domain, with female constituting the majority of learners and teachers. While this may suggest female advantage, it prompts critical reflections. Are women really privileged in our field? Do such patriarchal structures not influence perceptions and opportunities of women? So these questions are vital for fostering true gender equality. So the perceptions of, for example, the perceptions of what constitutes a good English learner, as we can see from a poll and Doubao image. Doubao is the most popular Chinese AI. These 2 images, as you can see, differ significantly. For example, Doubao depicts a female student diligently taking notes or doing homework, embodying the traditional obedient female good student image in the Chinese culture, indexing the high expectations for female English learners in China. Post version is not without flaws, as you can see from the flag, like equating a good learner, so with learning an inner circle or native English variety, but I will not delve into native speakerism here. So critical scholars have long argued that gendered discourses can influence language learners and teachers' investment in specific practices and opportunities. Thus, in this Chinese context, we want to know how patriarchal ideologies or gendered positioning may shape pre-service language teachers' identities as both learners and future educators. because these identities can impact their engagement and aspirations in English language learning and teaching. So I want to introduce this article that I co-authored with Professor Ron Darwin from UBC. In this article, we examined two pre-service teachers, PSTs, one male and one female, as identified by the cases. Both were highly motivated to learn and teach English initially at the very beginning of the teacher education program. However, the female PST chose to become a trader rather than a teacher upon graduation, rejecting to further invest in her teacher identity. Because this is a decision deeply intertwined with her gender identity. As a tutorial student from a sexist environment, she attempted to challenge gendered norms, but patriarchal ideologies influenced her perceptions of her own legitimacy as an English teacher. So this highlights how gendered and cultural contexts jointly shape teacher identity formation. Theoretically, this article draws on postmodern feminist cultural theories that critiqued patriarchy, its organization and reproduction of practices explicitly. We understand patriarchy as a gender ideology that is not consistent or fixed, but a set of competing dominant and marginal ideas that enable the understanding of teacher and gender identities of individual pre-service teachers. So one may not necessarily invest in gender and language teacher identities and commit to the teaching profession if, for example, a sexist, a racist, homophobic community marginalizes one's role as a female, a gay, or other identities. So this issue extends beyond any single cultural context. Dominant forms of Westernality has long been a part of patriarchal power and control over women in different sociocultural contexts of language learning and teaching. So patriarchal ideologies can thus entrap both English learners and teachers in unequal relations of power, where men are often perceived as more assertive, authoritative than women. Such practices hinder teachers from recognizing their own sense of legitimacy, especially when gendered expectations can shape their professional identities. So this challenge is particularly acute for PSTs because they are just beginning to internalize what it means to be a teacher, and a good teacher within a specific learning to teach community that can be racist or sexist. However, teacher education often emphasizes language skills and pedagogical knowledge or a competency, or often neglecting the issue of ideology and also identity. PSTs are real-life human beings situated in very specific communities, which are inherently ideological spaces. So fraught with tensions between emerging teacher identities and dominant societal and cultural discourses. So let's move on to our study and see how we actually address this issue. So this is actually a 15-month critical ethnography conducted in a Southern Chinese university. We aim to empower PSTs by challenging practices that marginalize or silence them. Recognizing that a context must be carefully examined rather than assumed, I will briefly outline the background. So firstly, some PSTs chose not to pursue teaching when their beliefs are dismissed, their voices are marginalized, or they're positioned as mere streamline workers in this context. Gender dynamics also play a role with filial obligations, patrilineal ideologies, and patriarchal biases reinforcing male privileges across various professions, not just TESOL, and learning environments. So this is the contextual background. Thus, this study situates this issue in the specific English PST education program in China to explore how the prevailing gender ideologies circumscribe institutional practices and relations and shape how a female and a male PST position themselves and are positioned as teachers. So here are the research questions. We selected these two participants from a large-scale survey with all the PSTs enrolled in the program, as well as one-on-one interviews with them who volunteered to participate. The two participants were chosen because they had the highest level of motivation to learn and teach English at the very beginning, but they have drastically different lived experience and reasons for learning and teaching English. And these reasons can be shaped by gender ideologies. As you can see, Yancy here rated his English as very good, actually the only one out of 400 students, even though he failed the National Standardized Test, TM, twice, whereas Beth, born and raised in the TESOL family, rated her English level as average, even though she has passed the test and won the national scholarship. So these are the case backgrounds. Here I position myself as a female PST educator and also a critical researcher with similar ethnic, educational, and linguistic backgrounds as my participants. After the pilot study, I lived on campus and recorded 10 English language and pedagogy courses that my cases attended, conducted interviews with them, kept a research journal, and collected their diaries, narratives, and artifacts for thematic and multimodal analysis. So you may wonder why I completed data collection in early 2023, yet this article was published in 2025. This study was a part of my PhD thesis on teacher motivation and investment, supervised by not just Ron, but also Professor Prem Viak. This article was written particularly for Beth, the case in my study. She's a female PST who shared her traumatic and shocking experiences with me. As a single child born and raised in an open-minded family and a tier 1 city, I actually had rarely experienced patriarchy firsthand before this study. So I used to focus on theoretical models and pedagogical innovations in my research. But engaging with Beth and her data changed my perspective as a teacher, educator, and researcher. So I think her story needs to be told for people like me to realize that PSTs are not like empty bowls to be filled with our own beliefs and knowledge. So they're real human beings. They bring their own life histories and lived experience to the teacher education programs. And PST educators need to take them into account while teaching. So inspired by her, I will amplify her voice and stances with you here today. Now let's move on to the findings. Although both Beth and Yancy scored very highly on the motivation survey, their motivation for teaching and learning English differ. So Beth comes from a lower class family with 3 girls and 1 younger son, all born during the one-child policy. So her family invested heavily in her brother's growth, often prioritizing males and sacrifice of the youngest son. So the family decided that she and her sisters would quit secondary school to save money for her brother's future. Beth was only allowed to study English in the university because being an English teacher for the family was viewed as a stable, safe job, suitable for women, enabling her to support the entire family after graduation. On the other hand, as you can see, Yancy was a single child born and raised in a tier 1 city with his family investing substantial social, economic, and cultural capital into his education. So he confidently envisions himself excelling in teacher certificate exam in China and ascending to a leading role when he graduates. So this is a self-position that is heavily influenced by his gendered beliefs about his capabilities. And these contrasting backgrounds highlight how gender ideologies shape their motivations and aspirations in English language education. And it's not just Yancy. If we look at this, Beth shared with me a Red Note post. Male candidates for the National Teacher Certificate interview displayed overconfidence, claiming that the interview is easier than else, which is not true, which is not, and that they can pass the interview even without attending it, claims that are simply untrue. But as you can see, how they can be privileged in this process because there are less of them. These PSTs are positioned by others based on their gender identities as well, even when they attempt to reject traditional gender norms. Beth's diaries and narratives reveal experiences of verbal and physical violence. She was punished by her teacher, which made her feel extremely anxious and hesitant to speak up in class. This finding questions the pedagogical protocol that English classes should be active, expecting everyone to speak up. For students like Beth, who only feel safe when they listen actively, forcing her to speak up can be detrimental to her mental health. Her father even beats her and her sisters without a clear reason. When she argued that he shouldn't do that, he responded, "I didn't hit you on the head, right? I can hit your hands and feet, so not that easily damaged, so meaning beat you to death." So what disturbed me the most actually was how calm Beth was when she shared this with me. She seemed to accustomed to such treatment, numb to pain. What angered her most, however, was her father's disdain when she was washing dishes in the kitchen. So a relative told her father that he should buy more plastic bowls so the daughters wouldn't have to wash dishes for a table of 20. Daughters to him are actually useless, according to the father. What else can they do? If the wounds are on their hands and feet, and could be hidden by sleeves and shoes they aren't really wombs. If daughters can wash dishes, do the housework, and earn family to support the family, they don't need to attend schools. So the observation data also shows that under the influence of gender beliefs, Bess often sat in the middle or back of the classroom and remained silent as the other female students, while Yancy sat in the front line, the first line, with other male students, frequently challenging lecturers and arguing with others. Yancy could speak out loudly, even interrupting to say like inductive after the entire class said deductive. Although Bess knew the answers, she had earned the national and university scholarships. Speaking up in class evoked national emotions for her, such as fear of punishment or judgment. So these gendered expectations shaped their classroom practices and confidence in a drastically different way. For instance, Bess was very nervous when she tried to introduce a TBLT lesson plan and said it focused on accuracy. So she later explained to me that she remembered the lecturer stating TBLT is not for China and emphasizing accuracy in class. That's why she hesitated. She and her group actually argued that the lecturer had double standards for male and females in class. The male students, including Yancy, presented a very simple lesson plan and received repeated praise like good, 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 while all her group of 4 female students was challenged and critiqued harshly, according to Bess. What Bess didn't notice was that, according to the observation data, the male group used Chinese throughout the entire presentation, only switched to English for key vocabulary. However, when her group, which shared also speak Chinese as the first language, as the shared language with their lecturer, tried to do the same, the lecturer actually responded with a firm no in English. So in the higher education context of Hong Kong, most lecturers follow the English-only policy as stated in teacher education. It's the similar situation in the Chinese context because it's required in the SET, student evaluation. One of my students also complained that I once used Mandarin and Cantonese to illustrate a local cultural norm in the EMI postgraduate program. So such selective translanguaging practices in this study are more harmful because the lecturer got to decide who can translanguage and who cannot, based on their pedagogical and even gender dispositions and beliefs that can be biased. So Bess in her diaries shared some social media videos to illustrate what she meant by double standards. This is not included in the article because it was suggested to be removed by a reviewer, but I think this is also important to share. This female influencer from Bilibili talked about her own experiences in this video. As you can see, her father's domestic violence was overt. Gender biases among female teachers are also subtle but prevalent, aligning with the recent study that points out how Chinese teachers, especially females, can have gender biases. For instance, the teacher was more tolerant with male students, punished female students, including the influencer, in different ways, making her feel like a damaged community that needs fixing. Such patriarchal ideologies are reproduced not only in the educational context in a popular TV show this year. The female host distributed the food, as you can see, in a way that did not respect the elderly or care for the youngest. She gave the chicken legs to the 2 male actors, leaving the wing tips for the older female chef and the youngest actress. Her actions and words sparked anger among the audience nationally, especially since the female actress was from Taiwan and has the name Didi. If you still remember, this term Di literally means younger brother. The mother of this actress actually said this on another TV show that she initially hoped that her daughter was a boy, so that's why she called her Didi. Unlike Bess from the rural region, all of these people are billionaires, but they are still influenced by patriarchal beliefs. So patriarchy is not limited to a specific social class, a region, or a profession. It's deeply rooted in the culture. Now we see how these gendered practices influence not only how individuals are positioned by teachers, but also how they position themselves. Such positioning shapes their dispositions and investment in their identities. For example, during a micro-teaching presentation, Bess complained that the lecturer interrupted her after only 2 minutes talk and showed no smile at all. So she was stopped from talking. While Yancy was very satisfied about this experience because the teacher actually listened carefully to him throughout the entire talk. Despite passing Term 4 and earning scholarships, Bess rated her English proficiency as average because she was positioned as such and felt not confident enough to be a teacher. Conversely, Yancy, who failed Term 4 twice, an exam only allowed twice, actually for English majors in China, rated himself as highly proficient and positioned himself as a capable teacher. So Yanzi has actually become a very good teacher by obtaining an MA degree with all the economic, social capital, cultural capital that he accumulated. I want to end this finding section with Bess's own reflections. She shifted from beginning her third year with passion for pedagogical and advanced English courses to quitting TESOL. She initially aimed to affirm her identity as a legitimate female teacher and pursue gender equity. However, she became aware of the higher social status accorded to men, potential discrimination in the job market, and the social expectations and roles assigned to different genders, which influenced her decision to leave the program. At the end of the investigation, she no longer wanted to be a teacher. The first reason was her family. They funded her study with the expectation that she would become a teacher in her hometown to provide for her family, especially her brother, but she refused to do so. Second, her gender beliefs sharply contrasted with the gendered practices in her own TESOL community. Male teachers are often seen as confident and powerful, while female teachers internalize these norms, believing that children need to be taught by men with masculine features and authority. Bess felt disappointed yet powerless, as throughout her entire life, powerful others such as parents, teachers, had the authority and right to wrong, punish, ignore, or dismiss her, reinforcing male dominance and silencing her voice. So finally, I will end my sharing with some of my own reflections and a positive note. My reflections begin with my how both teacher educators and PSTs can be constrained by patriarchal and hierarchical ideologies imposed on individuals. As I mentioned earlier, I wasn't aware of these patriarchal influences until I met Bess. Since then, I have started to realize how my gender and social identities can also intersect with my roles as a teacher and researcher. For example, as a victim of patriarchy, Bess asked me if I had kids. I said no. She then asked if I was married. I replied no, and she responded, why not? So this actually highlighted how these influences can remain unnoticed even by those affected. Similarly, as a research site, a senior male professor, a pure linguist who wasn't interested in critical or applied linguistics at all, tried to persuade me to join the university upon graduation by emphasizing my social and academic roles, but as a woman, like implying that I wouldn't need to do solid research at that university. When I asked my own postgraduate student whether he was interested in identity studies, he said, that's girl stuff. So knowing that I work on identity, I now realize that these statements do not just reflect curiosity, care, or humor. They are expressions of patriarchy shaping their perceptions. So in 2023, I was deeply upset about Bess's experiences. So as reflected in my own research journal. And I also felt powerless because I could not empower Bess to continue with TESOL, and I should not because it caused her pain. This interview with Professor Dai helped me to a large extent. Despite significant progress on gender equity, women still position themselves and are positioned by others according to the traditional scripts in the society. Even a professor of feminism from Peking University can experience backhanded compliment. Oh, your research is really good as a woman. So it reminds me of what my lecturer shared with me when I was a student at CUHK. A scholar commented his English as really good after his talk at AAAL. So one's English can only be good for someone who is a non-native speaker. So it seems like it's a compliment, but they are actually diminishing comments that reinforce power imbalance. So doing so, by highlighting their gender and linguistic identities to a feminist and a critical social linguist is even worse. So these presuppositions are that women don't do good research, non-native speakers don't speak good English, reflecting the speaker's ideologies of patriarchy, native speakerism, and probably racism. She's also she has also right about how powerful ones don't need prefixes like female as labels. We are using these labels for the marginalized group not to accentuate the labels, but to make visual the assumptions, ideologies, and trauma embedded and that can be triggered in the use of such labels. According to the sociological script theory, there is still much work to be done across the globe to embrace the new gender script in many professions today, not just TESOL. The traditional scripts also limit men. For example, patrilineal ideologies prescribe men to carry on the family line. So if you're gay or simply choose not to do so, you are also an outlier in the society, which can be marginalized or even punished. So let me end this talk with a final positive note. Agency and structure are interconnected constructs. Similarly, in TESOL, constraints and affordances influence gender-responsive actions. Thus, we need to reimagine language teacher development as a space for social change and educational and gender equity. So in this model, Professor De Clitus and I use the tilted line to represent the structures that are never neutral. We see how ideologies like native speakerism and sexism and patriarchy promote native competence as the pedagogical goal. Patriarchal norms shape male-dominated practices. Linguistic purism fuels English-only protocols. So as teachers, teacher educators, and researchers, we can acknowledge how these impacts and proactively challenge them through feminist, identity-critical, translanguaging, and transsemiotising pedagogies to foster more equitable and inclusive practices in TESOL teacher education. Thank you so much for your time. Please feel free to contact me or access this article and my other work by scanning the QR code. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This is, I think we all can resonate with you a lot. So maybe our co-host, we have prepared some questions for you. But I'll ask a question from the YouTube audience. Chura was asking, how do you compare, how do you discuss the intersection between social class and gender ideologies? So Chura in the YouTube audience is asking you to discuss a bit more on the intersection of social class and gender ideologies.
Sure, thank you so much. So I do think that in my study, these two identities intersect to a large extent because Bass was born and raised in a rural region in the Teochew community. So these are two parts of her background, rural and Teochew is rural. So I do believe that these two conditions jointly shaped her investment in her gender and teacher identities simultaneously. As you can also see another case like Yanxi, he is from a tier 1 city, so actually more than middle class. And his investment was also supported by not just social or cultural capital, but also economic capital. But for Bass is actually almost none of them. So I would say these two identities or conditions are related to different capital that they can negotiate and accumulate. For example, if we are talking about rural areas, regions, then we are talking about economic capital. But if we are talking about gender identities, teacher identities, we are talking more about social and cultural capital, like our relations to the powerful others, like teachers and parents. That's a social capital. But if we are talking about cultural capital, it's more about like the teacher certificate that I mentioned, right? Our education certificates, etc., etc. They're more about our cultural capital. So I believe they're related to different capital negotiation and accumulation. Hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Right. I guess the other side of his question is whether you would find more support for the female teachers, pre-service teachers, if the social class background is different. But I guess there's lots of variability. The social class capital might help the male pre-service teachers more than the female pre-service teacher, right?
Yeah.
So it's very complex but very important research question. Because ideologies, gender ideologies, as you so powerfully showed, it doesn't matter even if it's in urban or middle class situations, the gender ideologies can still override the social class capital, right? So, okay, so the Chunhong, maybe you can start asking questions as Chunhong.
Thank you, Dr. Zhang Yue, for this amazing talk. It's so powerful. It really got me to think about all the privilege I, as a male student, might have enjoyed in my learning and study. So, my question is about how we could design a pedagogical space for students who might have suffered gender ideology and all other kinds of ideologies in their teacher learning. Right now, Angel, Bongi, and I, we are organizing a book series on affect and care in English language education. So in that project, we view care as a relational space to counter inequalities and this kind of traumatic incidents that our students might suffer in the learning of English. So I'm wondering how you would approach the pedagogy of care in a classroom like your study, because in your presentation I found that the teacher might have some kind of gender bias, and this kind of thinking and behavior can further transmit it into the students thinking about how she positioned herself in the learning process.
A care pedagogy to challenge such ideologies and to empower our PSTs, not just female actually, because as I mentioned, like patrilineal ideologies can also disempower males in a certain way. So I believe that we do need to, when we do like needs analysis in our TESOL classrooms, we focus on language skills, prior knowledge, but we also need to know who our students are as social beings in their real life communities, not just the TESOL classrooms, so that we know what they actually want to become, what they actually desire, what they actually want to invest in throughout the entire PST education process. So this is also important. During the education process, I believe that we also need to take a look at how they actually perform and also react to our pedagogical decisions and practices. We need to critically reflect on such practices constantly. For example, students like Bass may not want to speak up and they just choose to listen actively. It can be active, right? So then we don't need to force everyone to speak up just to make the classroom more active, as stated in the evaluation form. We can allow some students to stay silent and do their work and mind their own business because they are also learning. If speaking up is traumatized for them, then we don't push them to do so. If an action is too demanding for them or can trigger negative emotions, we don't ask them to do so. So this is what I think is important about caring. We just do things that our students feel most comfortable with. We treat them not just as future teachers, but as social beings situated in a specific community. That's how we care about their identities, and we don't impose our gender or educational beliefs on them. Instead, we ask, what do you believe? What do you think of? What do you feel about your experiences? Yeah, thank you so much.
Maybe I guess normative meaning norms. There will be expectations of student teachers, teacher candidates. So maybe we could, they cannot, well, there is this dialogic conversation, or we will wait for them to become ready, because, in any normative situation, teacher education, that's why universities, Beijing normal universities, right? Normal. So you have to deal with these expectations of teachers from the discipline, and also how to care for our teacher candidates. So there is a dialogue involved. The dialogue can be silent dialogue, that we can be here to wait for you to become ready. But in the discipline of teacher education, a silent teacher, well, at least if there are periods when we can be silent, but there are periods when teachers need to talk. So, and we can, a pedagogy of care in the teacher education context, we need to deal with this situation of how we can dialogue with students about the norms of the teacher education discipline, but also about their readiness in a way that is caring and concerning. I mean, it's not easy. I mean, either or is not good. That's either we just let our students do whatever they like, which might or might not be a pedagogy of care. But imposing our expectations and not caring for what they are, whether they are ready, this is another extreme, right? The two extremes. For teacher education or any education itself is normative, but how we negotiate the norms with our students in a dialogic space, that's the challenge. So that's what I like to offer all of us to think about, right? If student teachers remain silent all through the semester, then then there's some issues, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, I just
Yeah,
refer to my particular case best here. Yeah.
that's right. But of course we need to be with a caring attitude to wait for students to be ready. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But in that particular case, of course, we must not force our students in the class to answer our questions. That's just not caring, and it will traumatize our students. So what is the best way? It is still a research question and a question of practice, right? How to dialogue, how to create a dialogic space, a safe space
Yes.
when students feel safe enough to speak a little bit, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe Niang, because now I know you need to leave early. So Niang, you have a question?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Zhang. I first I want to say I really, really like your research.
Thank you so
And I'm
much.
really glad to see some, this kind of topic focusing on gender ideologies in the Chinese context. I think that's extremely important. So personally, I'm just very, very interested in gender. So I have a question because you talked about, it's not really a question, it's just like something, the insights you gave me. You talk about the patriarchal power, like the male dominance over female, the cultural roots and how it's still being practiced in the TESOL industry. I think that's very important. But also in the same time, um, gendered ideologies are a lot. So there are not just male dominance over female, but like the binary view of gender, but also hegemonic masculinity, something that you briefly mentioned. This kind of ideology not only marginalizes female, but also the type of male that are not considered as, normal. So that's what queer theory tried to challenge too. So the other question asks you about the intersectionality between social class and gender ideology. But then for me, I'm very interested if you're willing or if you plan to dig deeper into the intersectional gendered ideologies in this program, in this pre-service teachers. That would be very, very insightful, and that would be very, I think that would be very impactful, yeah, for us. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. I really like your comments. Like I do plan to, further research this particular issue by like seeing how different gender ideologies, not just patriarchal, but patrilineal and other, ideologies can also shape how pre-service teachers negotiate teacher identities. And I think that's why I also mentioned, like, for example, how male and female were gender categories selected by the cases, not the researchers. This is also important because we just use how they position themselves in our study, not just a binary taxonomy of gender, simply classifying them into female or male. I also think how we can do it better. For example, in future studies, is there a better way to remind our participants who may not have such critical awareness of gender or gender ideologies or gender categories? Yeah, that's a question that I have in mind, and I don't have answer for that. Yeah, thank you so much now.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, can I just have a very small follow-up? You also mentioned one thing that's I think is very important is that internalize the gender hierarchy by the female students. Yeah, I think it kind of parallels to a lot. Internalize the racism, or even in queer community, internalize the heteronormativity. That's a key. Do you? I also don't have answer, but I wonder if there's any ways like intervention that we can approach this. If you have any insights, I'll be grateful.
Yeah, let's explore more in the future, definitely.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yes, I think as a field, we need to negotiate between, or we need to find a way out of either the static critical binaries, the structuralism, and then the postmodernism. I think both are not helpful. Postmodernism is taking away all the binaries. Now, I think the binaries exist in a trans in that moment, and because binaries are manipulated to marginalize people. So the impact of binary categories is very solid. So postmodernists want to take away the binaries, which is theoretically, which is a good move. How to implement it in actual practice when those in power exert their binary structures, right? So we need to have more nuanced discussion. We don't go to another two extremes, right? One is the structuralist, one is the postmodernist. We need to find a third way out, that we recognize that all these binaries are constructed historically, but then these historical sediments, sedimented patterns do have binary effect and impact. So we don't lose sight of both. So that's the challenge, both theoretically and practically, perhaps for future research and exploration, both practice and theory. Thank you. And let's have Bongi, your question.
Okay, thank you so much for your insightful talk, and I really am thoroughly enjoying this. And I have more question marks, however, though, where it feels like to me we have a lot of sticky intersection of race, gender, class, or binary genders and other issues. And I still am trying to grapple with this too. So I'm also, it's kind of my ideas are right now kind of messy. So please forgive me for not being fully clear on this. But I am aware of some of the early queer TESOL works has been emphasized, like, for example, Cecilia Nelson, a long time ago, has mentioned about the English and how power of English and how it's been seen as a tool for social mobility, especially for those who has queer identities, moving from Asia to moving to West, and that because the imagery of English is being more modern, assertive, and developed, therefore they were able to move away from their marginalized gender identities. Um, and and then also there is education, as you are nicely indicated, education is a very much female-dominated discipline and career, and especially TESOL as well. As we look at those who are involved, many of them are involved in females are involved in this area. Yet, I'm also very aware that those who have influence and powerful voices and well-cited are not necessarily female, but other people. So it's just constant, very uh, polarized view of what this is, because it seems that still in English, and then the education is seen as a very a tool or a mechanism, means for asserting their identities and being able to be successful and so forth. But your study really nicely shed light on the gender ideologies and gender inequities in TESOL. And I can also resonate some of your participant stories and your stories with you, even my own teaching, even when I am in front of my students, my race and gender identity pops out right away from the day one, and then it will be carried out all throughout, and will be reflected very harshly in my teaching evaluation. So I'm not trying to dismiss that our lived experiences, but at the same time, I'm just trying to grapple with some of the conflicting ideas that we hear. English is seen as a tool for social mobility, and English is very powerful means for marginalized groups to gain empowerment. Yet, why are we still in these domains? And I don't know, but would you be able to respond to some of those conflicting ideas? I'm sure you also have thought about this too. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Bongi. I really appreciate it. I totally agree with you. As a lecturer right now, I also see how my own, racial, ethnic, linguistic identities intersect to influence my teaching, and also how my students position me, especially as I'm a cross-border teacher from China, speaking, Mandarin and learning Cantonese. So I also position how my own stances, voices, or experiences with the local students and also the international students who may speak, English as their first language. It's very difficult. I probably not much about race, but indeed, I can totally echo. We do need to do more about how our gender and also racial ethnic identities intersect with our professional identities as a researcher, as a scholar, as a lecturer, as a teacher, educator, etc. Maybe sometimes just culturally, our cultural conditions just shape how we position and also demonstrate our own beings as scholars. For example, I try to say, no, it's not like that when people try to compliment me. And then I learn to say thank you, and to some extent, to share my research with others, like this great opportunity. Being modest is a part of our culture, but it's also kind of a gender issue to some extent. But sometimes we can reflect on these issues and try to see how we can be, empowered in different ways. So that's what we also need to work on. I do believe that. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you. Very nice sharing and discussion. And may I invite Chenghua to join in the discussion? Chenghua.
Yes, thank you very much for this wonderful talk, Evan. Just now I was listening to your talk, I was taking note, and I think I have, in fact, two points or questions that I want to raise up in the discussion. So the first one is regarding the practical ideologies that you insightfully delineated from your stories. And I want to talk about that as well. I noticed that in my own teaching and also in my own everyday life, I somehow also noticed that the patriarchal ideology is still very much impacting the life and well-being of not only the teachers, but also people around. But I had a question about our transformative efforts, which is that although through the storytellings we get to know, we can get to understand how these ideologies were still running and impacting people's life. And I noticed that not only in teaching, but also in the field, that oftentimes the critical discourses about these ideologies have been used without, I think, without the due analysis, like what you have done, but more as a direct weapon of fighting back.
Oh,
And sometimes sometimes I notice that it results in further like divisions. For me, I feel like even male teachers and students, and also generally a lot of males are also, I would say, the victims of the patriarchal ideologies in the society. But when we are conducting this transformative efforts, a lot of the time, that's critical discourses have been used as weapons of fighting. And then I feel like there's a lot of how to say a kind of revenge that is emerged like in different fields. Like people like when you use these discourses as weapons, and then you met with a lot of resistance. And I think it deeply affects I mean the efforts of our the transformative efforts. So my first question is, do you have any ideas or comments on that? Thank you.
thank you so much. I think we talked about this before, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
I actually don't have an answer for that. I totally agree that it can stimulate people's, negative emotions or even, reactions to our studies or discussion. I totally agree. The reason why we are being critical about certain, ideologies or practices is because they are harming people. They're traumatizing people because people suffer from such, ideologies embedded in different practices. That's why we highlight their voices and stances. We don't point fingers. We are just trying to show people that these spaces are not neutral. AI is not objective and things like that. So I maybe we can think about a way that is not, criticizing a specific group, but specific practices that people may not be aware of. This is one option that I can think of. We are not here to point fingers anyway, right? So if we aim for equity, not just gender equity, but also, linguistic equity, probably we can, for example, create spaces for people to navigate such ideological space, like translanguaging, right? If the context is English only, then probably we can provide a critical pedagogy that empowers students, learners to use their L1 as linguistic capital, and that affords them to invest in different practices. Or if we talk about gender, probably we can take a gender responsive or proactive approach, like creating spaces for both gender sides, if they identify them as such, to, negotiate issues, not just, answering questions, contributing to the discussion, but also really literally addressing a specific societal issue in the English classroom so that they can see how different identities intersect, including gender identity. Yeah.
Thank you very
Uh,
much. Yeah. Okay, I'll save my second question for later. Thank you.
Yeah, we can talk about that. Yeah. Thank you, Qinghua.
Yes, I think Xinhua pointed out, and Alan also pointed out the importance of true dialogic conversations between people who come from different backgrounds with different lived experiences, and so that we can draw upon the support in our field. Our field is increasingly polarized, that people coming from different persuasions, the critical scholars and the other scholars, they don't seem to dialogue with each other in their conferences, in their publications. So it's a reflection of the larger society, the polarized society. So you have the more critically aware people, and then you have the totally critically not aware people, and they each inhabit their echo chambers, and the same is being replicated in our field. So that might be something for us to think about, for myself too. If my critical scholarship is only read by critical scholars, then it limits the kind of change and impact. We want to reach out to people who are not critically aware, right? But of course, this is very difficult and challenging issue. Yeah. Okay, so Phoebe, last but not least, Phoebe.
Thank you. And actually, address my concern because I'm a frontline teacher. Very often, I understand that we are very busy. No matter whether we are P-service teacher, we have a lot of practicum sections. We are very nervous about being observed during class practice. So we often will seek help from AI, artificial intelligence tools, or some developed materials from social media or even YouTube channels. So as we are not very critically aware of the semiotic biases or gender biases sometimes, from your participation or research projects and your interviews with your informants, what should we do to support teacher education in TESOL if we cannot be totally disconnect from all those surrounding environment, and you also label it in your timer symbolism about the structure is always ahead of us, and it's like we have very pressurized atmosphere when we want to push away all those ideologies surrounding us. So what kind of thing you suggest us to develop for teacher education or resources management? Yeah, that's my concern. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Phoebe. Yeah, I believe it's very challenging to do so, but as we all know, probably we need to take this into account when we are, working on teacher education, when we are doing specific teaching practices, right? So because the dominant ideologies are dominant, because it's structural, it's very difficult to push them away, like entirely in our teaching practices. Because our teachers, they graduate to teach in such communities, we need to make them aware of such issues firstly, like critical multilingual awareness, critical gender awareness. But awareness is just the first step. Maybe we can also empower them to different critical practices, like decolonizing practices, gender responsive practices, translanguaging practices, and we enable them to do so with an understanding of what these practices signify and what changes they can make as individuals to their imagined communities, like their imagined teaching communities, if they want to be teachers. So that's how we can relate, their current identities, like social, linguistic, professional identities, to their imagined identities, like Professor Bonnie Norton pointed out. It's very important for them to be able to imagine themselves as legitimate members of specific communities of the society. So what they consider as legitimate practices in specific community of practices is also important. So we try to make them aware of such potentials, like how they can claim legitimacy as, for example, multilingual teachers engaging with translanguaging practices, like female teachers, like doing gender responsive critical teaching practices, etc., etc. Hope that answers your questions a bit. Thank you so much, Phoebe. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I look forward to some materials and designed by your team, and also you may capture some funded projects to enhance our semiotic awareness about the choice of colors or some expressions, or even what kind of resources we should build up in order to exercise our agency. What I can imagine from your suggestions just now. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Phoebe.
Okay, Qinghua. Thank you, Phoebe. Thank you, Adam. Qinghua, you said you still have one question, so let's get you
Oh,
onto
yes,
it.
I do. I do. So I'm not that very familiar with the tradition of gender studies. So I was wondering whether in our Chinese culture and traditions, there could be alternative frameworks and interpretive lenses. I'm not saying substituting ideology for patriarchal um, ideology, but I'm seeing that in terms of transformation, that's I'm thinking, there might be something in the Chinese culture that would help us to diversify our interpretive framework in terms of thinking how to do transformation. I noticed recently in the interview there was a question that I had to ask the candidates who applied to our university, and there was a question about the difference between 言传 and 身教, and the students
I
need
know that. Yeah.
and you know that you were also doing the interview.
Yeah.
So the students need to answer which one is more useful, right? I think these two concepts could be could potentially contribute to your research. That's what I think. So in the academic community, we are always writing articles and attending conferences and talking about these issues. And we think less about how we as a person might be able to carry out what real, okay, critical scholar would be like behaving in various settings, including in the academic communities. So I think this framework might help a bit. So I want to know what are you, do you have any thoughts on this as well?
Yeah, I totally like how you frame 言传身教 in the Chinese context, and also a potential, gender framework. It can be a theoretical direction that we can work on, because 言传 is more about like making students aware through our talks. But 身教 is more like who we are as teachers, especially if we as lecturers are blind to specific gender issues, it can be really a reproduction of like patriarchal ideologies and
Yeah,
other.
and even though you are all talking about critical discourses at the same time, right?
That's so
And
true.
especially when you are all talking about it, but at the same time you are practicing the second or the
Yeah.
other.
No, indeed. In my study, I also found, male PSTs, I won't say who, they use like adjectives like tall, strong, very positive ones to describe males in their images, but long hair to describe females. So this is reproduction. You are absolutely right. If we don't 身教, we just 言传, they may not be aware of such, issues, and the practices are still the same. Or they may say that, yes, I'm aware of gender issues, but actually they're reproducing such ideologies. And that's because they are pre-service teachers, and they are going to teach, generations of students in their future. It's really serious reproduction. So I do believe that maybe instead of criticizing, we can find a way, such as 言传身教, to actually transform their, habitus to a certain extent, not just, awareness level. I do like that idea. Thank you so much, Xinhua.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, that's an amazing discussion. I'm increasingly becoming dissatisfied with critical discourses. As you just said, discourses remain discourses, whether they're critical or not. So we are thinking of this affect, this engagement at the level of affect, feelings, emotions. And that cannot happen without this deep engagement with lived experiences, whether it is induced by literature or virtual experience of being. Chen Guangxing, this Taiwanese cultural studies scholar, talk about we need to put ourselves into the subject positions of those who are marginalized, a woman, a worker, ethnic minoritized immigrants. But then it's easier said than done. Speaking is easy, but our positionality, that is, if you haven't been subjected to the trauma of being bullied because of your skin color, your accent, your status as a female or as a gay, it's easy for you to say, oh yeah, I agree with you. We shouldn't discriminate against da 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 da. But if you haven't yourself been subjected to such traumatic, discriminatory experiences affectively, emotionally, it becomes lip service. And it can even become more toxic when critical scholars use critical discourses as symbolic capital to get published, to get tenure and promotion, as Professor Kubalter at UBC reminded us. Critical discourse can easily just become academic capital for publications. So to talk about trauma-informed scholarship, we should talk about trauma-informed critical scholarship. So Tsinghua raised this question, and you also, I think there's so much, your research is so important, so much more we need to do in this area, and we need to move away from just discoursing, okay, critical discoursing, to really look at how we can achieve dialogue, and in terms of M.M. Bakhtin's internal persuasive discourse with lived experiences rather than authoritative discourse. Critical discourse can easily become authoritative discourse. That's why we see the polarization. We see saying, oh, you critical scholars just doing discoursing, okay, just critical discoursing, right? So how do we achieve this dialogue, true dialogic space with people who haven't had the lived experiences? So like I am a Chinese in Hong Kong, I belong to a dominant group in Hong Kong. So I cannot realize how much of privilege I have until I migrated to Canada. Then I shift my positionality, and suddenly I got all the lived experiences of someone with positioned, with my skin color, my way of speaking, right? But for someone who have lived in Hong Kong all their lives as member of a privileged group, they will not realize the kind of trauma, day-to-day experiences, lived experiences of minoritized groups in Hong Kong and vice versa, right? So reflecting on our privilege, and we all have some kind of privilege, but of course we all can have lived experiences of being discriminated against or being bullied verbally, physically, psychologically, right? So achieving that, we need to go beyond the traditional critical scholarship of critical or non-critical. It is more than that. I increasingly feel it's not about being critical or not critical. It's about being human and being able to feel the feelings of other people, even though I haven't had exactly the same lived experiences. Being able to imagine the traumatic feelings and experience, and being able to develop some kind of resonance. Empathy is a term overly used and losing its meaning, but develop some form of resonance, resonant feelings, emotions, even though when we ourselves are not marginalized, but we can feel the feelings of those people who are being marginalized. Maybe that can be a future research direction. I sometimes feel the critical discourse scholarship can be quite misleading and just polarizing our society and our scholarship and our field that we just talk with. But I'm not saying it's not important, right? So before we end our very useful, very powerful presentation with Alan today, could everybody just say something, some takeaways, right? Starting with Nang, because you need to go first.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. So first of all, I just want to say that today, this event makes me feel like a community, like we feel like allies. So I really appreciate this kind of feeling. So, and also I think I benefit a lot from the conversation today, from Angel, from Alan, the issues about discourse, the issues, even the issues about binary, the issues about, how we move beyond discourse. That's really going to be the focus of my future work as well. And I hope we can carry on this work. I will read more from Alan's work, and maybe in the future, if possible, I'm very interested in gender, so we can work together on something. Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, Donggi? Thank you, now.
Again, I have more questions and more thoughts. But I am one aspect that I want to struck me or makes me to more makes me to think more is what is true dialogue, and we need to have some kind of develop some resonant feelings and moving away from echo chambers. And that is still a question than answer. And I am somewhat torn when I think about some of the critical scholarship in, let's say, feminist critical scholarship in psychology, when the one of the prominent discussion in the feminist ideas is for those people who are sexually abused or victim of the sexual violence, often tend to use more female language than that does not really does not really say does not really allow the male victimizer to understand the female victims saying no. And then these feminist scholarship says, or a lot of the counseling sessions or psychology recommendation is just say no, be assertive. And that's one way to move away from this and then follow some of the male talk or male or use male language so that they can be in the same somewhat equal plane. But there were also another line of discussion say, well, this does not really work that way, and it has to be the recipients, whether the recipients would be able to understand the victims saying no. So there's a whole literature on that. So one aspect that applies in our TESOL or the field of applied linguistics is that, well, perhaps we may have to follow the ways of how heteronormative men talk, or we may have to understand the way that the heteronormative society or patriarchal society works in order for the more marginalized groups to have access to it. And that's one of the recommendations that people are making. But at the same time, then it does not necessarily always well received, because it can be look like a Karen who is too talkative too micromanaging, and too assertive, too pushy, and being able to speak confidently does all of a sudden becomes Karen. So I am constantly still feel torn away from this is not following men's discourse. Does not necessarily always help us to be empowered and gain access to the mainstream. And then at the same time, when we think about our applied linguistics or TESOL, is tend to focus on teaching and learning English. And the other aspects such as gender, race, class, or other sexuality and other issues are often seen as something that is not the center of our scholarship, and therefore it's often get marginalized and it is not relevant to our own teaching. And how does, in some of the questions were, how does that really relate to the teaching effectiveness of learning English, for example? So these are still some of the remaining questions that I have. But at the same time, one aspect that I wanted to highlight from our discussion is ways for navigating a true dialogue, and then rather than just simple superficial dialogue, and how can we address that is a question, but hopefully that's kind of a good productive questions for new direction.
Thank you. Really get us thinking a lot. We need to invite Alan again to continue with this discussion for another section. Chung Hong. Thank you. Xinhua.
Thank you. I want to say this talk really pushes me to think more. Just now, I was thinking that maybe we have done very useful and insightful research using critical scholarship and a critical perspective to interpret what we have observed in our research. But I think maybe the next direction could go something like we should be looking for and focus on things that cannot be interpreted by critical scholarship, things that is not explainable by the current critical framework. And then that might push us to find maybe more productive. I'm not saying critical scholarship is not useful, but to complement it, or to go a little bit further. Yeah, so I think that might be a very interesting areas of research. And I noticed a lot of the lots of the articles as well. I feel like the current critical scholarship won't be able to explain well. Yeah, so that's my thinking. Thank you.
I think that's a wonderful comment, because if we look at the historical origin of critical scholarship, it dated back to modernism, to neo-Marxism, and all the Mayo tradition. Karl Marx, okay, and then the neo-Marxism, Frankfurt School. It's all Mayo scholars, and we are still citing them. When do we start citing? I mean, it's not about citing who, but the critical scholarship has this this patriarchal modernism, okay, as is in its background. Last but not least, Phoebe.
Okay, thank you, Alan, once again for sharing your publications with us, and also a lot of informative insight. What I learned from you and your projects will be try to provide space for ourselves, as no matter as in-service or pre-service teachers in the communities, to reflect on our identities. Because when I read your work, your scholarship focus on investment, identity investment, language investment. I think it suits Hong Kong, because Hong Kong or Asian mindsets are really pragmatic. We want to gather or maximize our gain for our life journey. And very often we have to trade off our own emotions sometimes, our own flexibility, and even our own reflective self, our self-representation. And nowadays, even for pre-service or in-service teacher, we focus on how to polish our identity or images in front of our students to look more attractive and attention-seeking. So all these will be very critical issues for us. And you have started our conversation and personal reflection on it based on your generous academic scholarship. And thank you so much for all this. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much. I'd like to end this seminar by saying that do not feel disappointed by our field, and we just need to change our field. You, all of us together, the next generation. We cannot wait for the field to change. It won't change. It will just perpetuate whatever it is, right? It's up to the younger generation of scholars, researchers, educators like you, yourself, Alan, who will bring fresh ideas and change to our field. And then, as Qinghua mentioned, we can stand on the shoulders of the critical giants, but we don't need to perpetuate their blind spots. I think we can go look for new insights and wisdom, for example, from the relational ontology of indigenous scholarship, which has been marginalized for so long. Indigenous communities, they look at relational ontology and epistemology, and which breaks through the binary of critical tradition from Karl Marx, from the Frankfurt School. We need to draw upon these traditionally marginalized resources, wisdom, and then we might be able to find new theoretical ideas to do our work of changing the field. So thank you so much. Our field depends on you, every one of you, the next generation, to change it, right? So with this, Alan, you want to say something? And then before we close our section today.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you so much, Angel. Thank you so much, everyone. I learned a lot from our talk. I now realize that we do need to push ourselves a bit forward. Like I would need to think more about like the topics we touched upon today, such as marginalization, such as Qinghua mentioned, transformation. Like Angel mentioned, we need to value the indigenous value knowledge and try to utilize them, push forward, and try to move beyond current critical discourses and see what else we can do. And the theoretical breakthroughs, etc., etc. I do learn a lot from our conversation today. Thank you all so much for your time, for your insightful feedback and everything. I enjoyed it to a large extent. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alan, for your wonderful scholarship, rigorous scholarship. Gets us all thinking about these issues. And thank you for those who stay with us on YouTube, supporting our channel. Please remember to subscribe to our channel, press the bell button so that you get notified of future seminars on our channel. Our channel is totally supported by volunteers. None of us get any monetary support, but your voluntary support means so much to us. We're all volunteers. Thank you. Thank you, Alan. Thank you, everybody. And have a good weekend. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.